You enjoy podcasts. We know because you're listening to one. Hi, I'm Jason Falls, the executive producer of the Marketing Podcast Network. We love podcasts too, so much so that in addition to providing you with the great episode you're listening to, we also help businesses, brands, and even individuals produce their podcasts. MPN Studios offers podcast consulting and production services to help you get you or your business its very own podcast. We've helped dozens of smart people, advertising agencies, and brands develop podcasts. All you do is record your content or interview. We take that and deliver a professionally produced audio or video episode complete with show notes, transcriptions, and even promotional clips to use on social media. And our monthly subscription prices are hard to beat. If you or your company are jonesing to have your own podcast to establish thought leadership, drive business leads, or just have fun talking about your business or topic of choice, we'd love to help. Learn more at marketingpodcasts.net/studio. That's marketingpodcasts.net/studio. You may know you're listening to this show along the Marketing Podcast Network, but did you know there are other great shows on MPN to help your business? Heather Eck hosts an amazing show called Your Radiant Spirit. Heather, tell listeners about the show.
What if the colors you're drawn to, the creative urges you ignore, and the quiet intuitive hits you brush off are actually trying to tell you something? Your Radiant Spirit is the podcast that helps you listen and live with greater clarity and purpose.
And where can people subscribe?
You can find and subscribe at heathereck.com/yourradiantspirit on marketingpodcast.net or search for it wherever you get your podcasts.
You heard her. Go subscribe.
Welcome to Your Radiant Spirit, a space for the conversations and colors that help you see yourself more clearly. I'm Heather Eck, an intuitive artist and guide, and I believe your soul speaks in the ways the mind can't always put into words, through color, energy, and the stories your body holds. This show is where we explore those messages. Through personal stories, deep conversations, and creative insight, we'll uncover what's been hidden, release what no longer serves, and begin to imagine what's possible when you live in full alignment with who you're meant to be. What you hear here is more than inspiration, it's an opening, a chance to feel the shift that could change everything. So take a deep breath, open your heart, and let's step into today's conversation. Art is not a nice to have. It is a must have. Without it, we don't thrive. We forget what it means to be human. Welcome back to Your Radiant Spirit, the podcast where color, story, and soul come together to help you see yourself more clearly and step more fully into the life you were made for. I'm so glad you're here today because this conversation is one that reminded me deeply of something I think many of us have been quietly missing, the healing that only happens when we are truly together. Before I bring in today's guest, I want to share something with you. You know, so much of this show is about finding the things that help you feel more like yourself, and color is one of the most powerful tools I know for doing exactly that. Every second Tuesday of the month, I host a free gathering called the Color Healing Community Call. It's a live, open space where we explore the healing language of color together, what it means and what it's revealing, and how you can use it in your everyday life. Our next call is Tuesday, April 8th, and it is completely free. I would love to see you there. Head over to heathereck.com to grab your spot. Okay, today's guest is Pam Uzzell. She's an Oakland-based documentary filmmaker and the host of the podcast Art Heals All Wounds. Pam has spent years doing what I believe is some of the most important work a human being can do. Sitting down with people, asking them to share their stories, and then presenting those stories to the world in a way that helps all of us understand our place in it. She has made 4 documentaries, including a deeply moving film about the Black high schools of Malvern, Arkansas before desegregation. And through her podcast, she has brought together artists, filmmakers, musicians, writers, and creatives from all walks of life to explore one central truth, that art is not a luxury. Art is how we heal. Art is how we find each other. And art is how we remember who we are. In today's conversation, we talk about storytelling as medicine, why in-person community might be the most radical thing we can reclaim right now, and what a group of teenagers with flip phones taught us all about what we're really hungry for. I loved this conversation so much, and I think you will too. Thank you so much for being here, Pam. It's so nice to meet you.
Hi, Heather. Thank you so much for having me on the show. It's really great to meet you too after corresponding by email and looking at our websites and things.
For sure. And I know you're so busy. I'm sure you've got a lot on your plate. So I appreciate you being here with me today.
Well, thank you. I appreciate being invited.
Awesome. Well, I'd love for you to just start by telling us your story. How did you get to do the work that you're doing now? And what led you to want to start your podcast, Art Heals All Wounds?
Mm. Well, I don't want to go all the way back to my childhood, except to say that I would have never imagined doing anything in a creative field in my childhood. Although I was always a big crafter, storyteller, and reader, but I I had no idea that those things were in the realm of creativity.
Oh, wow.
Um, I have been fascinated by film since I went to undergraduate college. I majored in something that was then called semiotics. They've now changed the name to modern culture and media.
Okay.
And I worked first working in feature films, mostly in sound, post-production sound. And I decided to go back to grad school after I had my first child. And there I discovered documentaries. Not that they existed, but I discovered the process of making a documentary. And that for me was that moment where you feel like, oh, this is my calling, is to sit down and have other people tell me their stories, and then you put it all together and you present a story to the world that's really touched you.
Hmm.
So I started doing that I think my first documentary was in 2007.
Okay.
That's possible. And so I've done 4 documentaries now, and when the pandemic hit, I found myself at loose ends. I did do one final short documentary at the very, very beginning, the first few months of shelter in place.
Hmm.
And then I just thought, well, I've always thought about podcasting. I like listening to them. And in many ways, similar. You talk to people, you get their stories, and then you edit it together, and then you share it with people.
Hmm.
So I did one podcast on a theater group called Theater Lab in Washington, D.C. And it was supposed to just be a one-off. And I thought, well, what's the name of the podcast is going to be? And one of the reasons I admired them so much is because I felt like the work they were doing was life-changing and life-saving,
Mm.
and a lot of community engagement. And so I thought, oh, it'll be Art Heals All Wounds. And I'll just present this story of this theater group. And then that was just so fun and gratifying and kind of healing for me too,
Mm.
as it allowed me to practice these things that I love about documentary. And I thought of all the artists that I knew who were also doing this life-saving work. And so I just started doing more and more and more. And then gradually, other artists who I didn't know about reached out to me, which was amazing for me because I don't have an art background and I've learned so much just from speaking to these artists. And I just find that them sharing their stories with both me and then the listeners is such a powerful thing.
Hmm. Absolutely. What was it about that theater group that you felt was so healing for you? I'm so
Oh,
curious.
this theater group actually was started several decades ago now by a friend of mine that I went to undergraduate school with, and we've remained very close friends. And so I followed the progress of this group, and they started off just as a very small business, she and a co-director, and they gradually they started so many programs for youth, so many programs for um, all members of the community. And one of the programs they were doing, which I thought was so powerful, is a program called Life Stories. And
Mm,
they're not the only theater group that does this. There are other theater groups that do this too. But you essentially work with a group of people and they write their life stories and then they present it as a performance. And they've done this with um, women's shelters. They've done this with incarcerated youth. They've done this with senior citizens. They've done this with veterans. And the end result is so powerful.
mm,
And I just thought, what an amazing thing. And who would have thought that just performing your story would be such a healing thing? And so
mhm,
I really wanted to talk to them to find out what is the idea behind performing your story. And, it's really about taking ownership of it and about realizing that your story is not finished yet. You are the author of your own story in many ways. And they just do such incredible work. They've started a program to train youth to have jobs in the theater, like
Oh,
behind
wow.
the scenes. So they're always, it's like as soon as they kind of get under their belt one thing, they're branching out to do another thing. They're just an amazing organization. So
Oh,
I
wow.
really, really wanted an excuse to interview them and tell people their story. So that's how the podcast got started.
That's so cool. I love that. I think the art heals all wounds is so powerful because there's so much art out in the world. There's filmmaking and writing and painting and dancing. You could say
Mm,
cooking, journaling, like anything that you create with your hands,
right.
is such a healing action. So, do you find that the podcast is a creative project that is healing to you as you're working with people and talking about them?
It is for the most part. I'm on hiatus right now till the first of the year because at a certain point it was overwhelming and exhausting. And my day job, which I do have a day job, really ramped up in terms of being busy and not in a bad way either. And then there were some other things that I felt like before I started doing filmmaking, I did creative writing and I sort of felt a call to try that again, or just more writing in general.
Hmm.
So for the most part, it is. And, the most healing part is for me to sit down and talk to somebody.
Mm.
And mm, yeah, I've often thought about conversation. I had a professor in grad school who said that conversation is the last way that we have to actually understand each other. So rather than, essays or, these different things, which that made sense to me, what he was saying. And that was before social media too,
Mm.
which is interesting and which I really have a lot of thoughts about, which we don't necessarily have to talk about. My thoughts are not unique or original, but that it is so harmful in so many ways for us as a society.
Yeah, it's really tough. It's so funny because my son is 12 and he just asked me a few minutes before we got on to record if he could get an Instagram teen account. And I
Mm,
said, oh, because I don't really want to go down that path with him already because it is, even for me in my 40s, social media is hard and it seems like a necessary evil for especially artists. That's where a lot of us live and try to share our work, and
right.
it's rough out there.
It is rough out there. I feel as if that's the one thing where I do see the value, although also if you think about that your product that you're putting out there is being controlled by an algorithm, it's also gets back to that thing of putting something out there where you lose your ability to monitor or market how that product is going to be used.
Hmm.
Um, When after the election, this past election, I did quit Facebook. I'm still on Instagram because I still enjoy it and because I feel as if I learn a lot about artists there. A lot
Mm-hmm.
of artists I would have never heard of if I had not been on Instagram. I'm still on LinkedIn.
Mm-hmm.
Enjoy mostly, I don't think LinkedIn's original purpose is still there at all in terms of, you're going to meet people and they're going to give you a job. But it's really nice, the people that I follow, to see what they're doing. And again, so many ideas are curated in LinkedIn. So I
Yeah.
I do enjoy that about it. But and X I've been off of for quite a while.
Mm-hmm.
So and
Same.
Threads I started and I just thought, why? I don't TikTok too. I started and I was like, I just like as a creator here, this doesn't make sense for me. And I've just spent 4 hours watching silly pets. So that one too, I said no to, you know.
Yeah.
Yeah, but I don't know. Oh, yeah, social media. Social
I
media is
know.
hard, and my children are much older than yours, and when it was whatever the age limit was, when they could get on social media, I never had a thought that it would be a bad thing
Yeah.
for them to do that.
And it's come so far that they're writing books about it. My friend told me about a book called The Anxious Generation, and it's all about the effects of social media on these
Right,
kids. And so, yeah,
right,
it's a really difficult thing to introduce to young people, and but it also feels like a necessary evil in so many ways. And so, it's a tough thing. But I do think I want to go back to what you said. Your professor said the conversation is like the last thing that we have. And
right,
I think for you in the work that you do and in your documentaries and your podcast interviews, they're all about just having a conversation with someone. And so how do you approach your storytelling by asking, the right questions to get these stories, to draw stories out of people in a compelling way? I am so fascinated by storytelling. I'm somebody who like loves to listen to the moth because I'm so inspired by
right.
people's abilities to tell stories. I mean, there are some, I laugh out loud, I cry, I'm like, they're so inspiring. So I find people's stories really fascinating too. So how do you approach your work and draw all those stories out of people?
Well, I would say that podcasting and documentary are really more different than I thought when I started. Podcasting, you're forgiven if you don't follow a 3-act, narrative structure.
Yeah.
And documentaries, people who make documentaries will have different approaches. My approach is that, well, first of all, you do a lot of research. So
Yeah.
you make sure that your person that you're sitting down with didn't have some amazing event or accomplishment that you don't even know about and you don't even ask about. But then to go in and you have to really build rapport
Mm,
very, very quickly. And I just try to come in with all the respect and humility and warmth and openness that I can. And then I let them answer very open-ended questions. Because when you ask someone an open-ended question, you're not putting a restriction on them on how much they're going to include.
hmm
And a lot of people do want to keep those answers more concise because the more open-ended it is, the more editing you'll have to do at the end. But when the documentaries I've done, I've never known the story. I've had the idea, but I don't know the story yet because these participants whom I'm interviewing are telling me the story.
Right.
So I can't really get in their way. And I don't want to try and shape them to say something that I want them to say. For me, it's really about asking that open-ended question, making sure that they know that I really care about their answer, and then
hmm
getting out of the way. You know, let them say what they want to say, and it's always given me beautiful results.
I love that. Getting out of your own way and letting them just talk and tell their story. And I imagine you have to hold a lot of space for whatever comes through.
Right. You do. And there's certainly been a few failures in this method. There are people who just really either they're not storytellers by nature or they really are not on board with the whole premise, this idea that you have. And that's okay. That's okay. But for the most part, people are amazingly good at sharing a story. And it could be a story about themselves. It could be a story about themselves in a certain circumstance. It could be about a period of history. I'm just kind of amazed at the people I've talked to who are able to create such relative and, or not relative, but what's the word I'm looking for? Mm, this
Is it
happens.
like resonant?
Yes. And also really understanding their place in history. Because a lot of my films have been about certain moments in history, and I think that I don't understand my own place in history as much as some of the people that I've interviewed
Mm-hmm.
do. So it's really, that's to me the fulfilling part is that you walk away always thinking like, wow, I had no idea that that's what I was going to hear.
That's
And
got to be even more inspiring then too, right?
and
Real.
everybody's own way of articulating things, their expressions, their tone of voice, it's always a surprise. It's always a surprise. So I love that. And podcasting is a little bit different because the end of a documentary, you don't want to hear my voice. Podcasting, there's a lot more freedom. You're going to hear my voice. It doesn't have to be a three-act narrative structure. And you're you can ask those follow-up questions really quickly. So it is different, and it was really kind of a learning curve to
Mm-hmm.
learn, oh yeah, in this type of conversation, I get to speak too. So
I get to contribute my voice in this story.
right, right, right.
Um, why do you think it's important or I'm thinking about art as medicine, I think of color as medicine. I think
Mm.
of energy as medicine. It sounds to me like you sort of see storytelling as medicine in a way. Like what have you noticed in the people who have been able to tell their stories? Have you seen shifts in how they like hold themselves or how they sort of move through the world differently after being able to share their story with people and feel seen and heard and understood?
Yeah, that's a great question. Often for a documentary, you interview them and then either you leave their space, they leave your space. And so thinking about an immediate shift would be a challenge, and I would
Mm.
have no way of knowing. But I do know I made a film, which is one of my favorite films, about the Black high schools in Malvern, Arkansas, pre-desegregation.
Well,
And the people that I interviewed, they were mostly senior citizens, some a little bit younger, mostly senior citizens. And I'm going to say two things. First of all, they already moved through the world in a way that was so impressive. And that's what impressed me. They knew their own power, they knew their own value. They knew the value of this story. They knew their importance in a certain place in history. And then once the film was finished, sometimes I was able to go to screenings of it. There was always um, a very, very healthy Q&A afterwards, and the film was very well received from audiences. It played on Arkansas Public Television. It was very well received. sometimes I was able to go and be there for a screening, sometimes I couldn't, and I could just go through and pick. I would just be on the phone and say to someone who I had interviewed, "Could you please, you and so and so and so and so, could you please go to this screening for this film and do the Q&A?" And all of them could. The ability to stand up in front of people and to talk about their stories, this particular place and time and what they went through was amazing to me. It was it was it was a lesson to me about how important it is to know and to share your own story
Mm-hmm.
and how that makes you move through the world with a sense of value and importance.
Mm-hmm. I think that's so important now more than ever. I think so many people feel isolated, especially since COVID.
Mm,
Um, there are a lot of people out there who just don't feel like they have anyone and they have trouble connecting. And um, I was just talking to somebody about this today, how they were nervous to share a part of their story on social media because they were concerned about what their former coworkers would think of them or what their friends or family were going to say. And I sort of instantly thought, well, maybe there's somebody out there who needs to hear your story because knowing that you went through something that they're also going through is really powerful because it
right,
makes them feel like they're a part of something or they're connected to someone. So I feel like
right,
that storytelling, being able to tell your story and being able to feel like you have value, that you contribute to the world and that you could potentially inspire someone else to do the same is really powerful.
right, right. Although I'm going to say, and I'm only speaking from personal experience, the social media aspect of it is like a really quick acting drug in that when you get affirmation or something, it can feel really good and then it's gone
Yeah.
like so quickly. And so it would be a beautiful thing if this person, through sharing their story on social media, actually made a connection to a community, and
Yeah.
sometimes that community is only going to be online. If it's a community that you can actually meet in person, even better. But I think that sharing your story, the real value of that is to find your people and to find
Yeah,
the community.
absolutely.
So that's what I would hope for this person sharing this story is that they get the value of doing that and then they're able to figure out how to make that a sustainable and really healthy part of their lives is connecting with other people.
Yeah, I agree with that. I think that that connection is really important
Yeah,
beyond just a screen. And
right.
yeah, and we had talked about this too before we started recording about being able to organize community screenings because that
Mm,
community aspect is so important. Can you tell us a little bit about your dream of that becoming more and what
yes.
value you think you that people will get from that?
Yes. Well, it all starts with the value I got from it, and I hope that others found this valuable. But last fall, another filmmaker, Kristen Tiesch, who was making a film called The Invisible Mammal about bats and how they're under threat right now, asked if I wanted to help her organize a screening by local filmmakers in the Bay Area about climate and the environment. And I said, yes, I would very much like to do that. And so we got together, I want to say it was like 6 different filmmakers, and we had a little screening, 50-person screening theater, which we filled and then some. And afterwards, there was just conversation with the audience, and for me, I left so inspired because first of all, 2 of the films had been made by, high school students,
Oh, wow.
and I was shocked and amazed, first of all, at how good these films were, but then I was also really hopeful listening to them talk about their understanding of community and how they knew that that was essential in order for anything to be done around anything, but especially around climate and the environment. And I think someone my age can start to feel real gloom and doom about the environment. I often, that is my mindset around the environment, and it's really necessary to remember that there are generations coming behind us who want to live a life, and to be gloomy and not showing any hope at all is such a disservice to them. They're thinking
Mm-hmm.
about resilience, adaptivity. How are they going to work with the planet as it's warming and changing? So it really inspired me. It really made me realize that there is a generational difference between myself, at least, and these students, because they are starting in a place they don't remember when, there was more snow, where there were hard freezes, where there were not excruciatingly hot summers. That's
Mm-hmm.
not where they're starting. They're starting in this place where there are already these challenges. So that was so amazing. And just to have people turn out and be curious and engaged was so wonderful. And then this past spring, another friend asked if I wanted to help curate and put on an Anais Nin diary documentary film festival. I don't know if I have all those words in the right order. And it was really wonderful. It was this collection of films that were all shot in sort of a diary style and about all different topics, and such a such an inclusive format because these were mostly shot on iPhones or other, low budget filmmaking here. And that was also really fun just to have people together in a theater watching and then talking about it afterwards. So
Mm-hmm.
it would be something. It's my goal to continue participating in having these screenings, whatever they are. And I feel like the lower budget, the shorter the films are, the better. It
Yeah.
opens it up to more people, and you see you know, a wide range of what the conversation is in these films. So it was really fun. And again, it was something I did so much more before the pandemic. And I thought, this is, this is healing.
Mm-hmm.
Space. We're all watching the same thing. We're all reacting to the same thing. We're talking about it afterwards. This is healing. So I would definitely like to continue doing that. I think we already have the Anais Nin, um, the next one on our plates for next spring. But in the meantime, figure out another one to be involved with.
I love that. That's so inspiring. I think, like we talked about before too, anytime you get like a group of people together who are all sort of rallying around the same thing, which is encouraging people and supporting them and um, just being there. I think like 95% of life is just showing up and showing support for each other,
I
having
love
a
that.
conversation with each other. That's what we're meant to do. We're meant to collaborate and we're meant to support. And there's a tremendous amount of healing in that for people.
Right, right, right. And not to keep looping back to social media, but there is a group I've read about with fascination called the Luddites. Have you
Uh-huh.
heard of this group?
I've heard that term. Yeah. Can you say more?
Well, it's a group of, a Luddite is someone who is like technologically um, slow or not sophisticated. And it started as a group of teenagers who decided that they were not going to be on social media, and they all went back to flip phones, and they would set up meetings in person together. And they started this in high school, And then they all went off to college, and some of them have sort of like, oh no, I have my phone now. But a lot of them are starting Luddite clubs in their colleges that they went to.
Oh,
And
wow.
I don't think this is going to become like uh, something that sweeps our planet, that people are going to throw away their smartphones. But I just thought it was so remarkable that these teens understood that this phone as a way of seeing the world through this tiny screen was not good for them.
Hmm.
And that the idea that they could be together in person was such a better idea. So I love when you see these breakthroughs where people do something so refreshing and
Yeah.
surprising, and they understand what's a healthy way to be in the world. So that's just, that's what I think of when I think about these community screenings, is that it's a version of the Luddite concept, and that we could show all of this on Instagram or some other place, but we are actually showing it in a theater, and we're sitting together and then we're talking about it afterwards.
Hmm. Yeah, that's so powerful, that community aspect of coming together and sharing in something. And you're making me think about, I just went to France in January and did a 2-week artist residency there in
Mm,
an old chateau. And it was the first time I had ever been alone with other artists who were musicians and composers and writers and visual artists and dancers and singers, and it was just this incredible community of people who didn't know each other but already knew each other. We didn't have to explain who we were to one another. We
right.
just sort of got it. And we would sit around in the salon every night before dinner and just talk about our work and talk about what we did that day. And there was something so healing about that time, just to sit and say, "What'd you work on today?" Like, what was inspiring to you today? Um, and I miss that every single day, because I think what you're pointing out to me or helping me see in this conversation is that I do look for community sometimes through that phone, and wondering why it feels so bad when someone doesn't engage with you, and you
Mm,
put your content out, or you're telling a story. Literally, on Instagram, they're called your stories. Um, and how good it feels when somebody pings you with that little like, and then how bad it feels when you work so hard to put out something that you want somebody to respond to, and you get like 3 likes on it or something.
right,
It's this
right.
push and pull, like, that sometimes I avoid in-person meetups with other artists or other like, quote, networking groups. And there's probably so much more. I'm not probably, there's going to be so much more value out of that in-person connection, or one-on-one connection like you and I are chatting, than there would be in that tiny screen.
It's so true. It's so true. And for me, sometimes even one of the reasons I stopped being on social media so much, and I rarely post, I will start posting again for when the podcast starts back up. But sometimes even when I get likes, it doesn't feel that good.
Mm,
It doesn't feel, it feels like a very hollow,
mhm.
very, empty, and not in the good Buddhist way. It feels very
Right.
meaningless in a way.
Yeah,
And I just realized for myself, I'm sorry, I'm so focused on social media in this conversation, so we can drop this topic after this, but I realized for myself it wasn't really the healthiest way I could spend my time.
yeah,
Yeah.
yeah. I totally get that.
But
Uh,
I do want to go back to talking about this experience you had,
oh.
these artists, because that sounds amazing. It sounds like what I really love about it is that it's a variety of artists.
Hmm.
You don't have to all be doing the same thing to kind of tap into that space of doing your work and then sharing it with your cohort that you were
Hmm.
with. And I love the idea that, however, one person might spend the day writing and the other person, working on music, and they can talk about that. And it's just such a beautiful, beautiful idea.
Yeah, it really is. I didn't really know what to expect, and I think part of me thought it was just going to be artists and writers, and it was so much more than that. And what I really loved about it, and maybe this is one of the reasons why I wanted to start the podcast too, was that I had so many amazing conversations with people there about how they got started in their creative journey. Some started when they were really young, some like me spent 20 plus years in the corporate world and then said, I never wanted this. Why am I here? And then make a flying leap off a cliff and hope that the net appears for you. But I loved hearing how, and again, it goes back to people's stories, right? Like I want to hear somebody's story. What inspired, this person to start making operas? He's like one of 10 people in the world who writes and edits operas. And what a cool job, and then the other person I was telling you about before we hopped on, who composes for films and documentaries, um and she, sits and she's working on her own musical about a
Mhm.
woman's story that she knew for a long time. And so I think now that we're talking about it, I think art is healing because all of the art that we create has a story somewhere embedded in it. Even
Right,
if you really didn't intend it to start that way, even if you're doodling, there's still a story in the doodle.
right,
Um, and I think that the ability to share that with someone is equally as healing for the creative person as it is for the person who gets to view it or listen to it or dance to it.
right, right. Yeah, I'm just going to stay on this topic though of doing things in person.
Hmm.
Um, and one of the best times I've had this year, besides those screenings, but the other really amazing thing, my partner, I'm at the age where my era and genre of music is 80s new wave. Um, and every year there's this festival down in Southern California called Cruel World Festival, which brings back these bands. I mean, some of them never quit touring, but there's a collection of bands on three different stages, and it's a full day music festival. And we've always looked at it and we said, oh, that's too much money. Oh, we don't have the time. Oh, we'll be too tired. Our feet will hurt. And this year, about a week or two before the festival, my partner's like, let's just go do this. And I was like, no. And I said, we'll be too tired. We'll be too, it's so much money. He said, look, we'll drive down. My parents live not far away. We'll stay with them. The dog can stay with them while we go to the festival. And then we'll drive back up the next day. So it's not that much time away. And let's just do it. And then I just started getting really excited, like, yes, let's just do it. And so we did. And it was so incredibly fun. It was like music festival for middle-aged, approaching senior citizen people, plus tons of young people. And being there with this whole crowd of people listening to this music. I mean, the genre music is not what's important. It's reminded me like, oh yes, you need to come see live music.
Hmm.
You need to see live music. It's really, that was a healing experience too. And
It
that was,
sounds like it. Yeah.
it just again, I think the theme of our conversation is about being with other people to experience
Yeah.
something. It's really so important. And the other thing I started doing this year, which I've been saying for years I was going to do, is I started participating in a drum circle. And it is so amazing. It's so amazing. I am not a drummer by any means, but you don't have to be. You just have to, like, be alive because, even if you couldn't move, you could make, like, sounds and, do rhythm in a group of people.
Yeah.
So empowering. And I really just thought, I will say I'm not shy about saying my age. I'm going to be 60 this summer. And I just feel like, what am I waiting for? All these
Yeah.
things I've said all this time, like, oh, I'd like to try that. I'd like to do that. And it's like, just what are you waiting for?
Yeah.
Just go do it and be with other people. I think it's something that really kind of fell asleep in me during the pandemic.
I
And,
think, yeah.
going to somebody's art opening, going to, a play, it is so fresh for me still after those few years of everything being mediated through screens, through, you, your partner, your dog, whoever, your plant,
Mhm.
whoever you were at home with. It's really, it's really remarkable. And I wish, I do feel, it's interesting, your radiant spirit. And I was thinking to myself, my spirit is not very radiant right now. My spirit is like really grieving and angry
Yeah.
about what's happening in this country, other parts of the world too, but particularly in this country right now. And I wish, on the one hand, I understand how people are searching for any way to find community and create meaning and to feel seen and heard. I get that in a big way.
Mhm.
And I am sad though, because most of us within our own towns we live in, within our own families, within our own workplaces, we have to be together with people who don't agree with us. And we're able to do it. And I'm not a religious person, but I did grow up Southern Baptist, going to church every week. And in fact, I went to two different churches as a teenager because I sang in two different choirs. And I miss that. I don't miss, I've tried to do church as an adult and it doesn't work for me. But I miss that being in a space and singing together and, just weekly you had this touchstone. And even within a church, not everybody agreed with each other. But that
Mhm.
ability to share a common space, to work together for common goals, even if you think it should be done this way, think it should be done this way. I don't know how we find that again, but I'm really hoping that we do. People already within their own families, they have to get along, even if they're not all on the same page. And
Mhm.
I wish we could remember how we used to do that, really.
Yeah.
And I'm not trying to say that things were perfect in the past, but I am wondering how we get to this point where people of differing beliefs can talk to one another again.
Yeah. You're 100% right. Something changed along the way where disagreeing with someone was just not an acceptable thing anymore.
Right.
It's such an odd thing, and the world is so divided, and especially here in the US, it's just so hard. I think about like this one person in our community, and she is somebody who is always out and about, and I think she may have worked in, like, Parks and Rec, and she had done social media for this. She was just kind of always everywhere and always sharing about things she was doing in the community. She was at this opening or that park opening or this pride event or that, and then next thing you know, I saw she was running for our local office, and I thought, "Yes, this is awesome." And
Right.
she's having like a kickoff event for her campaign, and I said to my husband, "We have to go. We have to
Yeah.
go be there and support her and show up for her, because she shows up for everybody."
Right.
And that's, she's somebody who is just able to be out in the community and talk to anyone, no matter who they are or what they believe. But what I
Right.
really admire about her is that she looked at the place where we lived and she said, "You know what? I think we can do better than that." And it's so inspiring to me. And I think I'm so compelled to support people who like to support people, and to create community and to create connection, and who want to make life a better experience for people,
Mm.
um, without any judgment or divisiveness, but just to say, like, we can do better than this, guys. Come on. And I'm
Right.
so inspired by that and her story. And
Yeah.
I think you're right. I think this whole conversation has really been about, like, reconnecting with some of the parts that we lost during COVID, when we
Mhm.
couldn't be together and when we relied so heavily on screens and technology, when that's, you know, part of our livelihood is in connection and collaboration and sharing with one
Mhm.
another, and we so desperately need to get that back in
Yeah,
whatever way we can.
I agree. I agree. Yeah. I feel like we've gone from communities to tribes and that it has not been good for us.
Yeah. Yeah, I
Mhm.
agree. I'm
Yeah.
so inspired by you and the work that you do. I'd love to know, like, are there stories that you're wanting to tell that are on your radar in the coming months and year that you're excited to dig into?
There are, well, I've definitely heard from a few people who are on hold, and all of their stories are compelling. One thing I want to do, which is going to take some outreach on my part, is that um, I would like to have people on who are being affected by all the funding cuts and have them share the work that they're doing. And actually, I can ask you, this is my question to myself. Is it better to sort of really be so focused on like funding cuts, funding cuts, funding cuts? Is it better to really, really, I mean, obviously that has to be mentioned that this is the project they were working on, but
Hmm.
to really more just showcase the project. That is something I would really like to do. Almost everyone I know who belongs to any organization has had their funds rescinded.
Hmm.
They had received a grant and the grant is being taken back, which is just in my lifetime unheard of and shocking. And
Devastating.
yes, yes. And for some organizations, it can be close to their entire operating budget.
Hmm.
And so this will take outreach on my part, but I would love to have these people come on and talk about what they were working on
Yeah.
and, what that project actually was. That would be that would be wonderful. And I also was pitched by someone who wrote a book about baboons and what you can learn about people from her long study of baboons. And I am so psyched to read this book and talk to her because I love primates. I love animals, but I love primates. And sometimes I feel like we are the we are the least kind primates on the planet. I would
Yeah.
love to hear what she learned from studying baboons her whole life.
Oh, that's fascinating. I would love to see that too. That's incredible.
Yeah, yeah,
Yeah, I
yeah,
love that idea. I love the idea of the artist projects that are all on hold because of the cuts and what stories they were working on, what projects they were working on that are, artists are the ones who like hold a mirror up to society and say, "Hey guys, this is what is happening here." And that funding goes away. A lot of us don't have the means to continue to tell those stories.
right,
And that's sad, because art is healing. We go back to that art heals all wounds. Um, it really does. And if we lose that ability, then what happens?
right.
Yeah.
You've probably read this book, Your Brain on Art.
Yes.
Yeah, that was really interesting to me because everything I thought about art and humanity was backwards.
Mm,
Art and culture turned us into humans, and art is not a nice to have, it's a must have.
hmm
And without it, we're not gonna thrive.
We're really not,
Yeah.
because it is so necessary. And I just had a woman who's a retired doctor on the show, and she became an artist during COVID. And so, what I really loved about interviewing her was that she was able to talk about both um, I guess, like the physiological aspects of healing when you create anything. Um, Relative to my idea of art and healing, and it's so necessary, like just 15 minutes of doing any sort of creative activity calms the nervous system and lowers cortisol levels and eases you into a happier state. And so it's so important, no matter whatever, no matter what you're into, whether it's knitting or crocheting or writing, anything you do. I have some sourdough downstairs waiting to be stretched and folded. Like all of that is so healing to us. It really is.
I like how expansive you're being about, what a creative activity is, because I think people are creating all the time and they don't
Mhm.
realize it
Yeah,
'cause
that's so true.
they
Yeah.
have a very rigid idea of what art is, but
Yeah. I hear so many people say, "Oh, I'm not creative," and they make these beautiful quilts, and I'm like, "What? But, but you made that." Yes, you are. You're an artist. You're a quilting artist.
right,
Yeah,
right.
it's fascinating. Well, thank you so much for sharing so much of your story with me today. I've loved chatting with you, and you've really given me a lot to think about as far as getting back out into the world and engaging with people outside of the screen. So, thank you for that. Where can people find you online? Tell us the name of your podcast and your website there.
Sure. My podcast is Art Heals All Wounds. The website is arthealsallwoundspodcast.com. And then I have a website called pamuzzell.com, which has some of my film work and a link to the podcast as well.
Awesome. And I'll put all that information in the show notes for folks to be able to find and hopefully at some point gather together in person to watch your upcoming films.
Thank you. Thank you. Thanks for having me on the show, Heather.
Yeah, absolutely. Thank you so much for being here. I love that conversation with Pam. She is remarkable, and I hope that you go check out her films and you get an opportunity to get out in public and engage with people in a creative way this upcoming week. As we wrap up, I want to thank you for being here and check in with yourself for just a moment. Ask yourself what stood out to you today and what stayed with you after listening. If something clicked or stirred or made you realize that there's more beneath the surface asking to be seen, that's not an accident. That is your spirit nudging you. And this is exactly the kind of clarity and support I help people with through laser color readings. And as a thank you for listening to this podcast, I offer these readings as a complimentary gift to you. So if you feel curious or have a quiet sense of yes kind of tugging in your tummy, I invite you to continue the conversation with me. Go over to Instagram, find me there. I'm at Heather Eck Artist, and DM me the word color. We'll start with a free color reading, and I'll help you understand what your system is communicating and what support, if any, feels aligned. Thanks for being here, and I'll see you in the next episode. Thank you for joining me today on Your Radiant Spirit. Every conversation here is an invitation to go beyond the surface, to listen to what your soul has been whispering, and to step into the life you've been longing for. If you're ready to go deeper, to work in a way that's personal, creative, and profoundly transformative, you'll find ways to connect with me in the show notes. Whether it's through art, a guided session, or a fully immersive journey, you'll discover a space where your truth is seen and your next chapter begins. If this episode spoke to you, it would mean the world if you shared it with a friend, left a review, or subscribed so more people can discover the conversations we have here. Until next time, my friend, keep noticing the colors, the moments, and the nudges. They're all leading you home. And for now, take a breath, hold on to what resonated, and carry it with you into the rest of your day. Thanks for listening.
This podcast is heard along the Marketing Podcast Network. For more great marketing podcasts, visit marketingpodcasts.net.